What happens when one of the world's biggest pop stars comes face to face with a late-night host who refuses to stick to the script? Tonight, we dive into the most uncomfortable television moment in recent memory, where what should have been a routine promotional interview turned into a career-defining confrontation that left audiences stunned and industry insiders scrambling for explanations. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this explosive clash. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Ed Sheeran settled into the guest chair across from Jimmy Fallon. The British singer-songwriter, promoting his latest album, appeared relaxed in his trademark casual attire, acoustic guitar resting against his knee. The audience, packed with devoted fans, erupted in cheers as the cameras rolled live. Ed Sheeran, everybody, Jimmy announced with his signature enthusiasm, clapping along with the crowd. "Thank you so much for being here tonight, mate." Ed smiled politely, adjusting his position slightly. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy, always a pleasure." "So, your new album," Jimmy began, holding up the vinyl record. "It's incredible. Really personal stuff. Tell us about the inspiration behind some of these tracks." Ed's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. "Well, you know, music comes from life experiences. Pain, joy, relationships, the whole spectrum of human emotion." Right. Jimmy nodded eagerly. "And speaking of relationships, there's been quite a bit of speculation about track 7. Some people are saying it's about a certain someone from your past." The studio fell silent for a beat. Ed's grip on his guitar tightened imperceptibly. "I don't really like to explain the personal details behind my songs, Jimmy. I think the music should speak for itself." Jimmy's smile never wavered, but there was something predatory in his eyes now. "Come on, Ed, your fans are dying to know. The lyrics are pretty specific. Red hair, like autumn leaves, promises we couldn't keep. That's got to be about someone real." Ed straightened in his chair, his voice taking on a cooler edge. "As I said, I prefer to let the music tell the story. I don't think it's fair to the people in my life to dissect every lyric on television. But that's what makes great music, right?" Jimmy pressed, leaning forward. "The vulnerability, the honesty. Your fans connect with that authenticity." "There's a difference between authenticity and exploitation," Ed replied, his accent growing thicker as tension crept into his voice. "Some things should remain private." Jimmy chuckled, but it sounded forced. "Exploitation. That's a strong word. Ed, we're just having a conversation about your art, are we?" Ed's question hung in the air like a challenge, because it feels more like you're fishing for tabloid headlines. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change in atmosphere. Jimmy's smile flickered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Hey, I'm just curious about the creative process. That's what interviews are for, right? Interviews are supposed to be about promoting the work, not invading personal privacy," Ed said, his voice steady but clearly strained. "I've been doing this long enough to know the difference." Jimmy spread his hands in mock innocence. "I'm not trying to invade anything, man. I'm just asking about the songs you chose to share with the world. If you didn't want people to wonder about them, why write them?" Ed's jaw tightened. "Because sometimes art requires vulnerability. That doesn't mean I owe anyone a detailed explanation of my private life." "But your fans, my fans," Ed interrupted, "respect my music without needing me to tear apart my personal relationships for their entertainment." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Jimmy's producers could be seen frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, but he pressed on. "Look, Ed, I get it. Privacy is important, but you're sitting here promoting an album that's clearly autobiographical. You can't blame people for being curious." "I'm not blaming anyone for being curious," Ed said, his tone growing harder. "I'm questioning your approach to satisfying that curiosity." Jimmy laughed, but it was hollow. "My approach? I'm just doing my job, Ed. This is television. This is what people tune in for." "Is it?" Ed challenged. "Or is this what you think people want because it's easier than actual journalism?" The accusation hit its mark. Jimmy's facade cracked slightly, his smile becoming more forced. "Journalism, Ed? This is a late-night comedy show, not 60 Minutes. "Exactly," Ed said quietly. "So why are you trying so hard to manufacture drama?" The question lingered in the air, as both men stared at each other across the small table. The audience, initially excited by the unexpected tension, now seemed genuinely uncomfortable. Some were looking around uncertainly, others checking their phones, as if hoping this was some kind of elaborate bit. Jimmy cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "I think you're reading too much into this, Ed. We're just having a conversation." "Are we having a conversation?" Ed asked. "Or are you conducting an interrogation?" The distinction was sharp, cutting through any pretense of casual chat. Jimmy's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Ed's response was measured, deliberate. "What's dramatic is turning someone's personal pain into content for your show." Chat controls sonnet for The words hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Jimmy's carefully constructed television persona began to show cracks as he processed Ed's accusation. The studio lights felt hotter suddenly, the audience's collective breaths seemingly held as they witnessed something far removed from typical late-night banter. Personal pain into content. Jimmy repeated, his voice taking on a defensive edge. Ed, you're the one who put it in a song and released it to millions of people. How is that not already content? Ed's eyes flashed with genuine anger now. Because there's a difference between artistic expression and cheap voyeurism. When I write a song, I'm sharing an emotion, a feeling. I'm not providing a roadmap to my private life for people to dissect and judge. But you have to understand, Jimmy continued, his media training kicking in as he tried to steer back to safer ground. When you're as successful as you are, people are naturally curious about the stories behind the music. It's human nature. Human nature, Ed repeated slowly, as if tasting something bitter. Is that what we're calling invasive questioning now? Human nature. The audience was completely silent now, some people visibly cringing at the escalating tension. A few had their phones out, undoubtedly recording what was quickly becoming an unforgettable television moment for all the wrong reasons. Jimmy forced another laugh, but it sounded strained. I think you're taking this way too seriously, mate. We're just chatting about music. No, Jimmy, Ed said, leaning forward slightly. We're not just chatting. You came into this interview with an agenda. You had specific questions designed to get me to reveal personal details that have nothing to do with my music and everything to do with creating a moment for your show. That's not. Jimmy started to protest, but Ed wasn't finished. Did you think I wouldn't notice? The way you phrased that question about track 7, you've clearly done your research. You know exactly who you think that song is about, and you were hoping to get me to confirm it on live television. Jimmy's smile was becoming increasingly forced. Ed, I think you're overthinking this. I'm just trying to give our audience insight into your creative process. My creative process, Ed said, his voice rising slightly, doesn't require me to expose private relationships that ended years ago. My creative process is about transforming experiences into art, not providing gossip for entertainment shows. The tension was palpable now. Behind the cameras, producers were making frantic hand gestures, but Jimmy seemed determined to push forward. Look, Ed, I respect your privacy, but you have to admit that your personal life has always been part of your public image, your relationship with Cherry, your friends, your collaborations. It's all part of the Ed Sheeran brand. Ed's face went completely still. The Ed Sheeran brand. The question was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Jimmy immediately realize he'd crossed a line. The audience seemed to collectively hold its breath. I didn't mean it like that. Jimmy backtracked quickly. I just meant that fans connect with you as a person, not just as a musician. Right? Ed said, his voice dangerously calm. So in your mind, my personal relationships, my private moments of pain and joy, they're all just part of a brand too. Be leveraged for content. That's not what I said, Jimmy protested, but his voice lacked conviction. It's exactly what you said, Ed replied, and it's exactly how you've been treating this entire conversation. You don't see me as a person sitting here trying to share my music with people who might enjoy it. You see me as content to be mined for entertainment value. Jimmy's composure was slipping visibly now. Ed, you're putting words in my mouth. I'm trying to have a genuine conversation with you about your art. Genuine. Ed's laugh was hollow. Jimmy, there's nothing genuine about this. You've prepared specific questions designed to make me uncomfortable, hoping I'd give you a soundbite that would go viral. That's not genuine conversation. That's manipulation. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jimmy's face flushed, and, for a moment, his media training abandoned him entirely. Manipulation. Are you serious right now? This is how interviews work, Ed. This is television. This is bad television, Ed shot back. Good television would be asking me about the musical arrangements, the production process, the collaboration with other artists. Bad television is trying to turn my personal life into a spectacle for your audience's entertainment. Jimmy's voice rose defensively. Our audience doesn't want to hear about chord progressions and studio techniques. Ed, they want to connect with you as a person. No, Ed said firmly. They want to connect with my music. There's a difference, and you've decided that the only way to facilitate that connection is by violating my privacy. Violating your privacy. Jimmy's voice cracked slightly. You're being ridiculous. I asked you about a song you wrote and released. That's not violating anything. Ed stood up abruptly, his guitar sliding down his leg. You asked me to confirm personal details about a relationship that ended badly, that caused real pain to real people, so you could have a moment for your show. That's not journalism, Jimmy. That's exploitation. The studio was dead silent. Even the crew members had stopped moving, frozen in place as they watched the confrontation unfold. Jimmy remained seated, looking up at Ed with a mixture of shock and growing anger. Exploitation? Jimmy's voice was getting louder now, his own frustration boiling over. You want to talk about exploitation? You've made millions of dollars writing songs about your personal relationships. You've literally built a career on turning your private life into public consumption. And now you're lecturing me about exploitation. Ed's face went pale, then flushed with anger. Those are my experiences to share or not share as I choose. They're my stories to tell through my art. What you're doing is trying to force me to give you details that I never chose to make public, but they're in the songs. Jimmy protested, rising from his chair now. If you didn't want people to know about them, why did you write about them? Because art isn't autobiography. Ed's voice echoed through the studio. Just because I write about heartbreak doesn't mean I owe you the name of the person who broke my heart. Chat controls sonnet for F. The declaration reverberated through the studio like a thunderclap. Ed's chest was rising and falling rapidly, his hands clenched at his sides as he stared down at Jimmy, who had gone completely rigid in his chair. The audience sat in stunned silence, many with their mouths agape at witnessing what had become the most heated exchange in late-night television history. Jimmy's face was flushed red, his carefully maintained composure completely shattered. So what, Ed? You get to profit from your personal experiences, but nobody else gets to ask about them. That's convenient, isn't it? Profit? Ed's voice was incredulous. You think I write music for profit? You think I pour my heart out in songs just to make money? Don't act naive. Jimmy snapped, his own anger now fully unleashed. You're one of the highest-grossing touring artists in the world. Your personal songs make you millions. So don't stand there and pretend this is all about artistic integrity. Ed took a step back, visibly shocked by the venom in Jimmy's voice. I can't believe you just said that. Why? Because it's true. Jimmy was standing now too, the pretense of his friendly host persona completely abandoned. You've made a fortune singing about your heartbreaks and your relationships. But the moment someone asks you about them in an interview, suddenly you're the victim. The audience was shifting uncomfortably, some people beginning to murmur among themselves. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television into something genuinely disturbing to witness. Ed's voice dropped to a near whisper, but it carried clearly through the silent studio. The fact that you can't see the difference between artistic expression and invasive questioning tells me everything I need to know about why this show has become what it's become. What it's become. Jimmy's voice cracked with indignation. This show is one of the most successful programs on television. Successful at what? Ed challenged, creating genuine moments of entertainment or manufacturing drama by making your guests uncomfortable. Jimmy's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. I'm trying to give the audience what they want. No, Ed said, shaking his head slowly. You're giving them what you think will get the most clicks and social media buzz. There's a difference. The accusation seemed to hit Jimmy like a physical blow. His face went from red to white, and when he spoke again, his voice was shaking with rage. How dare you come on my show and lecture me about entertainment? You think you're better than this because you strum a guitar and write pretty songs. Ed's expression hardened. I think I'm better than exploiting people's private pain for content. Yes, exploiting. Jimmy's laugh was bitter and harsh. You chose to put that pain in a song and sell it. You chose to perform it in front of thousands of people every night. But somehow, I'm the one exploiting it by asking you about it. Yes, Ed said simply, because when I perform that song, I'm sharing an emotion. When you interrogate me about the personal details behind it, you're reducing that emotion to gossip. Jimmy's face contorted with frustration. That's the most pretentious thing I've ever heard. You can't have it both ways, Ed. You can't build a career on personal storytelling, and then act offended when people want to know about the stories. Ed picked up his guitar, slinging it over his shoulder with deliberate movements. I can when the questions are designed to humiliate rather than understand. Humiliate? Jimmy's voice rose to near shouting. I asked you about your own song. How is that humiliating? It's not what you asked. Ed replied, his voice growing calmer as Jimmy's grew more frantic. It's how you asked it. It's the fact that you clearly came prepared with specific personal details that you wanted me to confirm or deny. It's the way you framed every question as if I owe you access to my private life. Jimmy was breathing heavily now, his composure completely destroyed. This is insane. You're being completely unreasonable. Ed adjusted his guitar strap and looked directly into the camera. I came here tonight to talk about music. To share something I'm passionate about with people who might enjoy it. Instead, I've been interrogated about my personal relationships by someone who seems more interested in creating viral moments than having genuine conversations. Don't you dare, Jimmy said, his voice low and threatening. Don't you dare turn this around on me. You're the one who turned a simple interview into a lecture about journalistic ethics. Because you turned what should have been a conversation about music into an invasion of privacy, Ed replied calmly. The moment you decided that my comfort was less important than your content, this stopped being a simple interview. Jimmy's hands were shaking with rage. Get off my stage. The words came out as a growl, barely controlled. The audience gasped collectively. Ed raised his eyebrows, a sad smile crossing his face. Gladly, Ed said quietly. He turned toward the audience and nodded slightly. Thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy the music. He walked toward the side of the stage, his footsteps echoing in the complete silence of the studio. Jimmy remained frozen in place, his chest heaving, as Ed disappeared into the wings. The camera operators looked around uncertainly, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. Jimmy finally seemed to realize where he was, what had just happened in front of a live audience and television cameras. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, and finally something approaching panic as the reality of the situation hit him. "We'll be right back," he managed to say, his voice hoarse and barely audible. The studio lights dimmed.